Well, I'm excited. We have Greg Nelson, Dr. Greg Nelson here with us today, which
You
I'm
can dispense with the titles, Jordan. I don't need that.
I think it's important because not only do you teach incredibly well and help pastor our church incredibly well, but you also operate on people all day, helping our bodies as well as our souls.
Yeah.
You've got a family, you've got a wife. When you're not doing all of those things that I just listed, I mean, is there anything in the margin, or is that when you just sleep?
Yeah, sleep is it has a place. I'm trying to make more room for it.
Yeah.
But I'm so blessed. I have an incredible wife, as you mentioned, who helps me so much, and a great church that I feel motivated and energized to serve, in this season, it's certainly busy, but I'm really pleased that the Lord has graced me and my wife and our family to be able to do so many different things. And we're always, juggling and making adjustments, but it's a full time. It's a very full season.
Yeah, very full season indeed. Man, it's great to just get some time to sit across the table from you and talk about singleness. But I mean, you had a fantastic message on Sunday that I just found incredibly helpful for me. As a married person, I mean, talking even more broadly just about singleness, but what does it mean to really follow Christ with our whole life? And just found that incredibly helpful. I was thinking back in my own life, just like, man, I wish that these teachings existed when I was single, which was a long time ago now. But reflecting on that, I mean, it really wasn't until I was married where I started understanding a biblical theological framework for singleness, and I don't know, I wonder for you, like looking back to your single days, like what advice would you have given single Greg, knowing what you know now, and what you've experienced, and even just some of the things that you've taught on Sunday? What would you tell single Greg if you were given the opportunity?
Yeah, the question is, what would single Greg have listened to?
Yeah.
I expressed some of that same sentiment that you just shared. This sort of sense of, I think there was certainly good intention in the teaching and things that I received when I was a single, and I was blessed. I don't want to pretend as there was nothing good that I heard, but there certainly were some deficiencies that I can see in hindsight. Maybe I'm wiser. Maybe I simply have expanded my my inputs, and so I'm hearing from or reading different authors or whatever the thought is. But the things that I think were maybe underemphasized or that I wish I could have heard more of would have been, first and foremost, something I mentioned in the sermon, this idea that spiritual pleasure, if you will, is a real thing. I have had the experience of trying to explain to baby Christians and even non-Christians what it's like to experience God, the fullness of God, the joy that is found, and had them kind of look at me like, what are you talking about? And, the scripture does tell us that spiritual things are spiritually discerned, that the Holy Spirit has to, in some ways, reveal or enliven us, like open us up to those realities. But the idea that saying no to sin and choosing holiness and righteousness could be experienced as the best life was not something that people really articulated well. It always seemed like the emphasis was on avoiding sin, because sin is bad. And that's true. Don't get me wrong. The Bible is full of warnings about the harms and the dangers of sin. But it's also full of positive exhortations, that this is what's available. Choose what's good. Choose life. Choose this kind of thing. And having someone try to help me both know what that's like what am I actually reaching for and chasing after, but also how that happens, like practically, like do these things. When you're saying no to something bad, you have to fill that space with something good, so that you are experiencing, and you're not just simply like having an experience of fighting temptation, like, oh, I'm weighed down by temptation. It's like, actually, no. Put your effort and your time, your energy into these positive things. That would be the first thing.
Yeah.
I think the second thing would be related to using the time to develop myself spiritually. And sometimes that comes across to singles, or in these talks to singles, like become the right kind of person for your future spouse. The reality is become the right kind of person, period.
Yeah.
Right? That's what Christ died for, to save us, to redeem us, right, to give us a new kind of purpose, and to grow us, right? That Paul talks about growing up into maturity, the fullness of Him who is the head. And so in the single season, there is more freedom, probably more time and opportunity to do certain kinds of things, to engage in certain kinds of spiritual practices or disciplines that become harder as the stages of life or the circumstances of life change. So I think those are the first two things.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you're talking about not just focusing on denial, but also in really filling that space. And I think that's huge. And I was actually talking with somebody over this past weekend about I think it's in Matthew 12. There's a really strange parable that Jesus talks about where he's explaining this evil spirit that like leaves a man, and there's all this strange language about traveling through waterless places, and there's some mystery wrapped up in there, but basically says when it leaves the man, after a while comes back and brings 7 of its friends with him, and
who are worse
than him, finds the house, the person swept clean, picked up, everything put away, but then enters the man and says, and Jesus, I think, finishes the parable saying like the latter state of the man is like worse than the former state, And I think when I think of that parable, I think of what you're talking about is like so often we can focus on denial and just trying to push things out of our life that are bad, rather than focusing on filling that vacancy and that void with Christ and with His goodness. Like you're saying, it's like there's incredible benefits and blessings to experiencing more and more of God in our life. And there's always those spaces that we find often that we didn't know were there, as God reveals them to us. Like either this is occupied by enemy territory or it's just vacant, which both are opportunities to fill and to experience more,
absolutely.
more of God. I think that's that's such a key thing for any of us to know and to pursue. Love that, man.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me of this George Mueller quote. And Mueller says this: "The first great and primary business to which I ought to attend every day was to have my soul happy in the Lord." And so in that sense, I want to fill my house with the goodness of God every morning, whatever, that metaphor means to you. Different aspects of my soul, different parts of my life, finding ways to infuse God into it will be central to an experience of contentment and an experience of Him as sufficient. Thinking about that. The quote I shared also from Sam Alberry, that the end of all our longings are found in Christ. To see the desires in my life not as negative things to suppress or as directing, sort of defining things to just submit myself to and always be pursuing, but instead to say, no, all of these things are speaking to me about who Christ is and what Christ can do for me and what I can experience from Him through His Spirit. How do I get my longings today satisfied in Christ? and
Yeah.
then I can go about my day in a different kind of way, not living chasing,
Yeah.
but living fulfilled, or living living out of something, not living reaching for something.
Yeah. Like this sense of living out of abundance and overflow rather than, sparsity and
Yeah, and that's kind of
emptiness.
scarcity.
Yeah.
mindset, if you
Scarcity.
will.
Yeah. That's really good. I mean, the other thing that you talked about was really, basically time management, and I think a lot of, it goes for marrieds and singles in terms of a guideline for time management and how we spend our time, how we honor God with our time. But what would you say to maybe a single person who's looking to do that better,
Yeah, I think that I would say, the assumption, obviously, or maybe I shouldn't say obviously, the assumption is that singles have a lot of time, all right? And it may be unfair to singles at some level because maybe they are very busy. I don't know everybody's life and experience. It is true that there are few responsibilities in life that might be as all-consuming as parenting. I think we could confess to that, but singles may be caring for ailing parents. And so in their life, maybe the tables have turned, and that can be a very stressful experience. All that being said, most people who are single probably have more flexibility in their schedule than people who are parents, and certainly that's something to think about and to recognize as a positive benefit. Not to put a burden on singles to say, hey, you must do these things, or we expect you to prop up the church and be at every event, but instead to say, as Brian spoke about in his previous sermon series, actually, leverage that we want to live life looking for opportunities and try to figure out how do we best utilize or invest these opportunities for kingdom impact. But I would ask every person, and certainly singles, to really review their life and really take a time to consider how they're doing that. For the person who is single who maybe feels that they're not content emotionally, relationally, whatever that is, the question obviously should be, are you really harnessing opportunities in your life so that you can get the most God impact out of them?
Yeah.
All right. And I believe that as we are on mission with God, I believe that as we become more deeply aware of our adoption as children of God, that we should be able to chart, looking back on our life, like a deeper, richer, fuller experience of life walking with Christ. One of the things that singles confided in me as I was asking for their thoughts had to do with moving from maybe their 20s, which might be the quintessential single, right? The one we often think about, into 30s and 40s, and saying, well, what about my life now?
Yeah.
Things have changed, circumstances have changed. Often I think that singles who get to those stages tend to maybe experience those stages with more sadness or discontentment because they're thinking the window for marriage is closing. And now I'm going into this sort of sad or depressing or lonely season, being 40 and single, and the potential that I was looking forward to, all this positive goodness and the future hope that's setting, right? The sun is setting on that, and that can be a really challenging experience. I want to acknowledge that. But at the same time, what I would say is that if we are walking in Christ and growing in Christ, I think that the 40-year-old Christian single actually has even more to offer than the typical 20-year-old Christian single. Right? Maturity in life has value.
Yes.
Right? There's
absolutely.
a reason the Bible says, like, in all you're getting, get wisdom.
Yeah.
Okay? And the 40-year-old has had twice as much time to get wisdom than the 20-year-old has.
Yeah.
And so what I would want to say to the 40-year-old singles among us is that you can be, you likely, if you've been walking with Christ and are committed to walking with Christ, will be a sharper tool in his hand for whatever it is that he has for you at 40 than you would have been at 20. And to continue to think about your life in that sort of gospel strategic way. At 40, older, wiser, more seasoned with God, I can have a deeper and greater impact with the same amount of time than I could have when I was 20.
Yeah.
Lord, how do I keep pressing into that so that the fruit that I experience, which nourishes me and others, is sweeter? And so I would want singles moving into these later stages of their life to feel just as much hope, if not more, because in this sense, I think that there ought to be an assurance that their gospel fruitfulness will be better.
Yes. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah. I mean, Paul highlights that exact theme in 1 Corinthians 7, and I wonder if it'd even be helpful just to read it. Like, I mean, you're talking about this these seasons of life that we're in, and the Bible's not silent, on what the aim of those seasons are meant to be, the target that we're aiming at. And he says, I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious about worldly things and how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit. And he's building that framework that you're talking about, of the time that's available. It says, but the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order. Again, this idea of management and, good order within our life to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. Man, like, what a good target to aim for.
Undivided devotion.
In some ways, it's like Paul's almost saying that target of undivided devotion is, I wonder your thoughts on this thing. It's almost seeming like that target is like more challenging for the married person in some ways, because of the different responsibilities and we pulled in different directions, to kind of manage things, versus solely being attentive and undivided towards the mission of God and, his.
Yeah. The Bible is intensely practical and pragmatic. So I think that Paul does recognize that. Now, again, broad strokes, right?
Yeah.
So the average person who has an infant is going to have more urgent needs presented to them. My wife and I contest to this, or not contest it, but confess to this as well, will tell me, like, I haven't had 15 minutes to think a full thought today. Because every time I get 5 or 10 minutes and I start on something, someone comes up, mom, right? And kids think every problem is a fire that needs to be put out. And, God bless their hearts. Like, for them, that's what their experience is. So singles generally aren't going to have that kind of experience.
Yeah.
And it's cute when it's, it's the baby, but it's not as cute when it's like 2:00 in the morning and your infant has been sick and you have to change all the sheets and change their clothes.
Which I hear was a recent experience for you.
Yes, I just throw that in there. Okay,
just figuratively,
just taking some shine off of this whole thing. So I think Paul's point is well taken. Now, Paul is not glorifying singleness. He's not looking at it with rose-colored glasses. Read the rest of what Paul says about his experience, right? Out in the world, working for God, suffering, and these kinds of things. But to the extent that there is that flexibility, I hope that and pray that singles will see that as a benefit of the life stage that they're in, and say, okay, opportunity for a kind of investment that maybe I won't be able to make in later stages of my life or other stages of my life. But what I would hope is that every single would ask themselves, and every Christian, of course, but every single would ask themselves, okay, this is the stage and state that I'm in. Lord, what would you have me do with it? How can I press into relationship with you, mission with you, in a way that will keep Christ in the forefront of my mind and give me a deeper experience today, next week, next month, whatever, than I've had in the past, so that Christ is all and Christ is in all.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the goal. And so, we want to give practical advice to our single friends based on what we've experienced, based on what we see in the culture, so that they can excel in godliness. I mean, that's really, really what the goal is.
That's really good. What role would you say that church as family should play within the context of, some of the things that we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I brought out in the sermon is I think that every person has an innate and God-given desire for intimacy. That is an experience of being known and knowing others. I think that the gospel gives us the greatest foundation to have that experience in this life. Because, as Tim Keller says, like, the gospel tells us that we are more deeply flawed than we ever imagined, but more deeply loved than we, could ever realize. And so, in that sense, for the single person, where we know that the experience for humans is that sin tends to isolate us. I mean, we feel the vulnerability of our brokenness. We don't want others to see it and reject us, so we pull away. It might be true that in marriage you've got a person it's hard to pull away from because they're in your house. But emotionally, people can do that. I mean, people can experience loneliness and isolation in their marriage. And maybe that's the worst and most intense kind of loneliness, actually, because you're not supposed to have that.
Right.
But I would hope that single people would see that the gospel gives them a foundation to begin to engage relationships, even in the church specifically, that will combat the experience of loneliness. And that's, I think, what God designed the church to be. Certainly the hands and feet of Jesus, sort of showing the world what Jesus looks like, but as well, a body nourishing itself, each equal parts nourishing itself and building up the whole body. And so I would want to encourage them and cast vision for, and even practically create opportunities for them to experience that, to go below the line of shame, to have, maybe a few people who they really are sharing their life with, to experience, hey, I see the darkest part of your soul, but I accept you like God accepts you. I'm not pushing you away. I'm actually pulling you in. That kind of experience. I think that takes work. I shared that as well. Singles will sometimes, it's just like, oh, I found this person and we have these interests, and it's just like clicks, and that's amazing. That's a great experience. But other times it's like, oh man, this friend that I've been walking through these hardships with, they really are kind of a drain on me. I mean, let's just be honest. That's how people are. We have needs. And I hope that the single wakes up, gets themselves happy in the Lord, and has something to offer that friend every day. And then for the single, like, it's really hard for me to share this failure again. Like, I don't really want to open this up. This is a wound. It's painful. But, like, actually, no, I want them to see that, like, the grace is there. That's where God is administering His grace to them, is in those relationships. And some, relationships are going to be messy. Sometimes that you go and you make a time to meet with someone. If you're a single integrating into families, right? You're like, I wanted to go and have coffee with this great, woman of God who's leading, and all we did was like talk about how her kids are struggling, or I don't feel like I got out of that what I wanted. Well, she is a person who has needs too, and you ministered to her. So praise God, like, bless you for that. So it's give and take, and it's a process. I think we understand most of these things at an intellectual level. The challenge is to stay committed to the work so that we can see the blessing, right? The farmer doesn't reap a harvest without doing a lot of work on the front end. And so, Paul encourages us in other places, like, do not grow weary in doing good, because you will reap a harvest in due time. So, we talked a little bit in the sermon about some practical concepts or ideas about that, in terms of ways to get singles and families, like, connected. And again, I think about that sort of quintessential 20-year-old single, but also about the 40-year-old singles, about the empty nesters and the widowed among us, all these ages, really trying to find ways to get them mixing. I think community group, I didn't really hit that nail during the sermon, but community group is a great beginning point for that, and hopefully people are really engaging in groups. That's why we always tried to be a church of groups, not a church with groups, like it's a secondary thing, recognizing that getting into each other's life on life discipleship is really the point where iron is sharpening iron. And sometimes community group, satisfies that at a certain level, and you need to go deeper. So I think discipleship is a big piece of that.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I mean, we even took some time to pray about that this morning, of just every person finding a place, within this community, and Jubilee being a space where everyone doesn't just have a title of brother or sister or father or mother or son or daughter, among us, but it's like something that's really felt, and something that is experiential when someone comes to this church. But I mean, like you were talking about, that doesn't happen overnight. I think it is something that is supernatural, that God can do in us, that actually binds us together like a family, but it's also something that can just take a lot of time and investment, and like you said, almost like like the work of a farmer, planting and stewarding and just being consistent over long periods of time, which, like you said, is why community groups exist. It's like, the group I'm in now has been together for, I don't know, 6-7 years, awesome. Something like that, That's great. But like that longevity matters. Like it makes a massive difference.
Absolutely. Just to carry the analogy, if you, my understanding, I'm not a farmer, but my understanding is that if you are, especially for like fruit producing trees, the first few years after you plant a sapling or a young tree, it doesn't really produce fruit. But it can take 4 years or 5 years before the fruit really is produced, or the fruit has really high quality as the tree grows and matures. And so that's what I think about when you talk about being in a group for 6 or 7 years. I'm sure there's fruit that you guys are reaping today that you invested or sowed 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 6 years ago.
Totally.
And that's really where the sort of, if you will, the sweet spot.
Yeah. No, that's really good. And I think with all the margin that you do have in your time, you should take up farming. I think that would be great.
My wife and I have this joke about wanting to start an urban farming ministry, actually.
Heck yeah.
And we were going to call it, we were going to try to mix it with music.
Oh, okay.
We're going to call it Fresh Beats. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a very great idea in its early stages. I think now's the time to get that feedback.
That's right.
From others. Maybe before you cash in your 401k, maybe just get some input on it, and then just see where it goes.
Wisdom and meaning counselors.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Fair enough. We'll leave that aside.
No, that's good.
No, there was one other thing I wanted to mention about your question around spiritual family.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to start with I want to try to avoid maybe starting with a bunch of stereotypes, but any person who joins church can have an attitude of the consumer. Right, I'm here to see what this has for me, and that's probably okay at the beginning, right? You're people coming in, we're hungry for something, and we hope that they're finding Jesus there. What I would hope is that as we are preaching the gospel and we're talking about these themes of spiritual family, that people will start to gain vision for what their role might be. And interestingly, in a family, you wear many hats, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm also a brother. And so I would hope that singles who are coming in are thinking outside the box of their singleness and see that they can be spiritual fathers, spiritual mothers, spiritual brothers, spiritual sisters to others, and that they would be gaining vision and being equipped, by us, the leaders and elders, to step into those kinds of roles. So again, thinking about the single who's maybe in their 30s, maybe in their 40s, maybe in their 50s, the typical sort of thought about singles is that they're, somehow like immature, they need a lot of help and hand-holding, but, the goal of the Christian life is to grow into maturity. And so I would be, if I think about the sermon that I gave and the vision, the biblical vision for singleness, I would hope that people come away feeling really motivated, really empowered to say, actually, it's time for me to step into something that maybe I haven't stepped into before. If I'm 35 and single, if I'm 40 and single, it's time. I can start being a spiritual father. or a spiritual mother.
Yeah.
We talk about our adoption ministry and our fostering ministry, and obviously your family is a great example of God like producing fruit out of that. But like maybe we need more spiritual adoption in our church, so that people are saying, look, not everything about my life isn't perfect.
Yeah.
But God is at work here, and there's, I got some fields that are producing. I got other fields that I just planted. We're hoping something to come and see how God is doing this work. How can I help you get your house in order and sweep it clean, and then fill it with Christ, that kind of thing. So hopefully that's the kind of thing that singles just would be thinking about themselves and their position and their role differently with like boldness and passion and positivity, because I really believe that that's what God wants for them.
That's really good, man. Yeah, that call. I think of Paul writing to Timothy, like that was his. Those weren't just words when he's calling Timothy like my beloved son.
Yeah,
that was
absolutely.
like that was. I mean, you read the letters that he wrote to him, and it's like it's not just words. Like he feels that fatherly responsibility for Timothy, and that is possible and should be, I think, more and more of a reality within our church, where, like you're saying, there's people taking responsibility as a spiritual mother or as a spiritual father for others in the church, to feel responsible for bringing them up into Christ and into maturity, and saying, come, follow me as I follow Christ. Just, like Paul did. It sounds like it's kind of the framework that you're talking about.
Okay, Jordan, I'm going to turn the tables and ask you a question.
Oh, all right. Bring it.
So, I have had the pleasure of, serving the church and alongside you and your wonderful wife, Lissy, for several years. And I have to just confide in you or confess to you that I've always admired the way that you guys have found opportunities to incorporate singles into your life. You have a big family. You have 3 kids of your own. You have 2 kids now who are your kids, but through adoption. And what I haven't seen is, well, we're so busy running after all these kids, we can't really, interact with people in other stages of life. But instead, actually, you're here, your kids are running around playing with singles, and singles are in their life. And obviously, I hear that from singles that they have learned from you and benefited from your wife's wisdom. So give us a little bit of a sense. This maybe is now for the families, but like, how do we turn the tide? How do we start to create that as the norm and not the exception in our church?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, for context, we have had, since my wife and I were married, we've probably had like close to 10 singles live with us at different points and for different periods and a variety of ways. And I appreciate your kind words. I think one of the main motivations for us, honestly, was some degree of like a lack that we felt to some degree in some ways. Like we didn't really have like biological family around, and I think it was always in us to create a sense of family within our home, and that we wanted the borders of our family to continue to widen and increase. And so that was, that's probably the heart of it. And I think that's one of the things that eventually led us to adoption and to foster care, was that idea of God calling us to extend the borders of our own family. But it's also, it's also played out in practical ways as well. Like I said, we didn't have a lot of biological family around. My wife's originally from England, so it's like all of her family are over there, and they're an incredible blessing when they do come. But it's just pretty few and far between. And it's a long way to travel, and so when we started having kids early on, we were early 20s when we had got pregnant with Elsie, our first, and so some of it was like practical. It's just like, oh man, this is this is tough,
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
and I think we also, I mean, there was a ton of mutual benefit. I think that we experienced having people welcomed into our home. I was like, hey, you're part of this now, you know,
Yeah.
whether you like it or not.
Yeah, you're deputized.
It's like, yeah, it's like, you know, clean up the baby tray after dinner, you know, and everyone just pitching in and helping out with chores and taking care of kids and stuff like that. But then we also felt like we could be a blessing and a benefit to people that were in our home as well. I mean, some of it again was very practical of like, hey, your rent's going to be pretty dang cheap because we know that all the stuff that's going to come along with living in a house full of young kids. And so we were able to, you know, my wife's a great cook. She provide meals as part of the deal. And so it very, very much was just like, hey, you're just getting chucked into the mix here. And I think, you know, what we've heard from a lot of the singles that we have had live with us was, especially in that transition period, coming from, you know, living with, you know, your family growing up, and then kind of starting to spread your wings a little bit as a young adult, having a bit of a transition point where it's like you're carrying more responsibility, but you're still experiencing a sense of family and learning how other families operate and things like that.
So you've given us some spiritual context for this, right? This idea of like wanting our family to borders to expand, this kind of stuff. But bringing someone into your home who is not, you know, biological family seems like a very radical act. And if it's a gospel act, then like, okay, that actually makes sense, right? Jesus is calling us to radical and countercultural living. But be intensely practical with it. What is that conversation like with Lizzie? You know, like, hey, should we consider like opening our home, our sacred space to this person? What are not just the values, but maybe the specific goals that the two of you may have said, like, look, this is what we're trying to accomplish in this. And then maybe a little bit about like, what is the actual conversation like when you invite that person in, or maybe just some of the circumstances that might have led to choosing that path.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think for my wife and I, she grew up in a family environment that was doing this. You know, they fostered kids. I remember even when we were dating and I go over there and visit, you know, there'd be kids in the house that they were doing respite care for, or there was lodgers staying with them who were at a local university and they were, you know, supporting them as they're kind of, experiencing university life. And so there's always people around her home environment. I would say my family, where it tied in with my family and my context where I came from was like, we were kind of always the hangout house, you know, that growing
cool
up.
Kids.
Well, part of it was practical. We lived across the street from my high school. And so it was just a natural space where people, same with my siblings as well. Any of our friends, any given time, we just kind of had an open door policy where it's like anyone could come over whenever, and we'd raid the fridge, and nice. We'd always be out of groceries. And, I'm sure my parents loved that, but there was always a revolving door. We had one situation where we did have a gal live with us that needed a place to stay for a season, but outside of that, it was more of that dynamic where it's just like anyone's welcome anytime kind of situation. And so I think that mixed with her context, there was some natural lean towards inclusivity.
Some experiences in your past that helped you have some vision or gain.
So it wasn't like we were,
it
wasn't like we were like starting from scratch and like trying to build out this framework for our family and what we wanted that to look like. I feel like our parents helped us, get ahead of the curve to where it's like, this is the kind of family and environment that we want we want to create. And then I think God just began to build on top of that desire to make that even more permanent, through things like adoption and foster care. And so part of it is like, I think God, when he's given us much, he expects much of us,
Sure.
And I just feel like in some ways, like we were given so much as teens and the way that we were raised. And it's like, we kind of felt this sense of like, God's expecting us to leverage and utilize some of those values that were instilled in us.
That's fantastic.
In that sense. And then, so there wasn't a ton of like conversations that had to really convince or kind of like pull and tug and feel like we got to get on the same page about something. I think it was never that. There's definitely a lot of prayerful conversations about what we should say yes to, what season we're in,
Absolutely.
and what would be beneficial and stuff. But we've also had. There's also actually a funny story of one of the single gals that we asked said, "Hey, we want to offer this. If you would like to live with us for a season, help save some money, and there's some practical things that she was trying to do in that season of life, and so we had her over to the house and just to have dinner and get to know her. We didn't know her that well, just had heard of her, good reputation among the church, and just felt like, I feel like this should be something we should offer. And I remember sitting down at the table with her. We had, our kids were younger, a lot younger than they are now, and my kids. We're eating dinner in the middle of dinner, and granted, this is like the first time this gal has ever been to our home, and we're about to talk to her about whether offer this, opportunity to live with us, and so we do that, and our kids had just learned about the story in the Bible of Rachel and Leah, and the whole multiple wives situation. So literally in the middle of dinner, they're like, hey, Dad, is this like a Rachel and Leah situation? So I have to literally explain to them that, like, and to this girl, this single girl, like, that's not what we're asking here. That's not what we're asking here. Okay. This is, So I just, we were extremely embarrassed, but had a good laugh. It's a good story,
Well, the unpredictability of children and what they say. So.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. All right, great. Well, obviously, I appreciate you giving us some insight into those things. I can say, in my own experience, I benefited from that sort of like hangout house sort of experience that you lived. There was a family in my neighborhood when my parents split up. That was the place that I always kind of ran to, and that was the place where I first experienced and saw like Christian family really done in a way that I think is biblical, winsome, and had an amazing, powerful impact, certainly on me, but just on the neighborhood, all the kids, all the guys running around, coming in, eating all their food, and emptying their fridge, that kind of thing. I see how, I certainly can see how that isn't kind of a precursor to maybe an even greater level of hospitality and generosity that you guys have practiced, and I think our church has really benefited from. So that's really awesome to see the generational kind of impact, how that builds. Yeah. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks, man. Is there anything else just in our final few minutes here that you would want to say that we haven't covered, on this topic? Any wisdom or advice that you would want to share with the singles in our church, or even, or it could be the marrieds, and how we interact? And
yeah, absolutely. There's maybe one of the questions that had come up had to do with how singles decide or make decisions about what to say yes to, what to say no to. Again, getting back to this idea of like, well, there's more free time, or there's more flexibility, or maybe Paul alludes to it. And that's the assumption can be sort of, It could be weaponized, and it can be used against singles in a sense of like, hey, you have all this free time, you must do this, right? That's not what we're saying. I don't believe that that's God's attitude to singles. But rather, if the goal of every Christian is to know God, be made in his image, and then reflect the life of Christ to the world as Christ lives through us, then we all need to have and live from a place of some spiritual practices that help us sort of, as Jude says, like keep yourself in the love of God. And so what I would say to singles is start there. Discern what God is calling you to in this season. If you're busy doing so many things, saying yes to everything in such a way that it impedes your ability to be and stay connected to God, then that's actually working against you. That's not God hasn't called us to a life of busyness or a life of activities, but a life of being. It's about our experience. Certainly, we do things, and things can be redeemed or invested for the gospel. But I would want singles to not feel a burden in that kind of way. I would want them to feel responsible to God. We will all give an account for the way we live our lives, and the things that we build will be tested by fire, that kind of thing. And I certainly wouldn't want singles who have a level of flexibility to look back on their own life and think that they squandered or wasted that time, invested it poorly. The other thought that I have is connected to that, but maybe relates more to the experience of loneliness that singles can have, and it can be very intense. And so I want to be really sensitive when I think about this, and pastorally sort of address this. But there is a reality of being single if you're not living with a bunch of roommates or living with family, that you will be alone a lot. And I mean just like plainly, like physically by yourself. And that can, trigger an emotional experience, which we would call loneliness, right? An awareness of your aloneness that's painful, that feels like a lack of connectedness in a relationship. But I would hope that singles see that again as an opportunity. The Christian practices of solitude and silence are very much neglected in our time. And I have been thinking about this a lot in my own life, trying to figure out where am I going to fit this in. I get up early on Saturday mornings to try to be with God, and inevitably I have a kid come down and jump in my lap. And that's okay, because it's good for them to see that practice or see my attempt at that practice. But the challenge is they come down hungry and they want breakfast now. They're not interested in dad having time with God and Jesus and getting breakfast in half an hour. And so from that standpoint, I would hope that singles would be empowered and encouraged with a gospel sense of urgency to use that alone time in the most productive way, which is to be connected with God. And so it may be that they just need to look at that circumstance, I'm physically alone right now, through a different lens or through different eyes. Actually, this aloneness right now is not can be an experience of loneliness. And maybe I get caught up in that thought process or that emotional experience. Or maybe I need to try to reinvest or reapproach this time and make it a time of connectedness to God. And so again, I don't want to simply like spiritualize things, but I also wouldn't want singles to miss that opportunity or miss out on that freedom to despise a good thing God has actually put in their life because they're tempted to think about it in a worldly way, or maybe in a broken way. And so, I would just hope that they would be constantly looking at the circumstance of life that they're in and saying, where are the opportunities? Where do I need to invest? God, where are you trying to put something good into my life and I'm missing it? Help open my eyes to see what you're up to in this season.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I think the enemy's great at sowing seeds of lies and deception, and I think that state of being alone can be an environment where either the enemy speaks lies to us, and or we allow that space to be filled with the voice of God and His presence and goodness. And because I mean, even in that 1 Corinthians 7 chapter that I referenced earlier, Paul kind of nails out on the head of that lie of the grass is always greener on the other side.
Yep.
This, and any of us can fall prey to that idea, that concept that, if I was only, the lie for the single is that if I was only married, then I'd be content, then I'd be satisfied, then my life would be what I want it to be, and then the second you get married, the lie changes to the grass is greener on the other side.
This is actually harder or more difficult,
it's like,
or not quite what I expected.
Yeah.
Man, I wish I could go back
Exactly.
to what I used to have.
Exactly. Yeah. If I was only single, then my life would be what I want it to be,
Sure.
And I think that's helpful.
Yeah. When I think back to my single life, I benefited from having some great Christian roommates, and we were broke and cheap, so we squeezed like 4 guys into this apartment, and we had some great times of fellowship there, and that was really a benefit. So obviously I want singles to experience that. I'm a bit of an extrovert, so if I could, I just filled as much of my time with people time as I could, and that was I enjoyed that, and I think that God blessed us that we could redeem that, and it was positive people time, not just frivolous people time. But I can say that what I wish I had done more of is this sort of like turn my alone times into like spiritual alone times. I can think of several spiritual alone times where God did something really foundational in my life, really that are still in my mind sort of like spiritual touch points, or like, they would say like an Ebenezer, you like raise a standard so you can go back to it and remember it, those kinds of moments. I can't think of as many people times that were that influential, and so part of me is like, why didn't I realize that and like really grab hold of that? So there's balance, right? I mean, I want to say that, but I had felt a pressure, like if I'm alone and I'm not with people, like I need to study more or like do more work. It's something like quote unquote productive.
Yeah,
and I would just want to say like, the spiritual stuff is productive. I mean, really, really, really great. And God will use it, and it'll keep producing fruit in your life. And so, I hope that singles can resist the lie that they're floundering, that they're floating through life, that they're aimless, that they don't have purpose and meaning and value, and actually see that actually every redeemed life is filled with opportunity for gospel productivity and fruitfulness. And I probably want to end with that encouragement to them.
That's great. Appreciate you, man. This has been great talking about this stuff, and I think we performed some spiritual surgery. Now you get to go and perform some real surgery.
Well, but today I'll be seeing patients in the office, but maybe I'll convince them to let me.
Hey, you get that itch, to open somebody up, though. You never know.
You never know.
Might just happen. So, This is great, man. Appreciate you.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm really blessed to be here.